All right, welcome everyone. My name is Kaisha Gabriel. I'm the North America Field Marketing Manager for Kellton Tech. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Guide to an API First Strategy. Before we get started, let me go over a little housekeeping. Should you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the Q&A section of the control panel and we will address them at the end of the webinar. We do not have time to respond to your questions live. Don't worry, we will respond to them via email. The session is being recorded and will be made available to you a day or two after the webinar. Now I would like to introduce our speaker for today's session. I'm honored to have with me today Ram Kanamuri. He is an enterprise integration expert, renowned for his technical expertise and his keen ability for designing innovative solutions to complex enterprise-level integration challenges. He got his start in digital integration over a decade ago and is passionate about leveraging the latest technology and product innovations to deliver maximum return on investment for his customers. We are excited to have him with us today. But before I turn the presentation over to Ram, I'd like to begin with a brief corporate overview. Kellton Tech has been a pioneer of digital transformation for the past decade. We have operations in North America, Europe, and Asia. Our clients range from startups to Fortune 500 companies, with a core strength supported through our ISO 9001 certification and CMMI Level 5 compliance. Kellton Tech is 1,500 plus employees strong and is a publicly traded company. Next slide, please. Kellton Tech is a new age global IT services consulting company. We design, develop, and operate digital technologies that create business models for our clients. We offer digital services across 6 major pillars: digital systems, digital connected enterprises, systems of record, outsourced product development, digital commerce and marketing, and IoT-enabled platform and solutions. And now let me hand the presentation over to Ram, who will provide a little more detail on our digital integration pillar and begin our official topic discussion.
Thank you, Kaisha. Thank you for that quick introduction. Before we delve into the topic of the day, which is API and API strategy, API first strategy, I just want to quickly introduce Kellton's digital integration practice. As you can see here on the slide, we're a technology agnostic practice, also have expertise in and capabilities in IBM, Software AG, MuleSoft, Oracle, Informatica, Red Hat, Linux as well. We are also part of a network called Changemaker Network. These are the innovation partners that we partnered with in being able to design digital systems, innovative R&D on trending technologies like IoT and analytics. With that being said, you can see Kellton Tech is primarily a digital transformation company, and we help our customers in defining their digital goals and objectives and follow through with establishing strategy, defining maturity roadmaps and a reference architecture. Kellton's solution engineering capabilities on the integration space now deal with hybrid integration, API management, and IoT solutions. With that, just quickly wanted to start with today's agenda. In this webinar, we will learn on our API first approach on technology agnostic. We support all the commercial off-the-shelf platforms that enable hybrid integration and API management from IBM, from Software AG, MuleSoft, Oracle, Informatica. And we are also a part of a new network of Changemaker Network partners that we created an ecosystem to enable innovative digital systems and IoT and analytics as well. Today, we're going to concentrate on very specifically the API strategy for enterprises and what it means by API first approach to solve very specific business problems. And once we try to address those business problems and various aspects of solving those business problems, we will quickly learn about assessing our own API maturity level within the enterprise, within the teams, within the sub-teams. There is a way we prescribe, and I will quickly take you through that. But most important, we will be talking about the most important API maturity levers that an enterprise should build upon in their execution plan, is what we will talk in detail. But in the end, we'll just quickly talk about what value we bring to the table and end it with question and answers. So I think important aspect I would like to audience to understand is, yes, APIs will solve some problems, as everybody will say, from Gartner's to Forrester, and API economy is no longer a fad, it's the reality. But what are the specific problems that our enterprises face is, most digital enterprises with rapid moving interconnected systems have multiple types of digital IT assets, microservices, APIs, analytics. All of these are fundamentally digital cloud applications. And for them, not able to extend their innovation or their digital systems into an innovative cycle, that these assets can go through rapid lifecycle changes that bring a feedback into the business for even more innovation into their line of business. So bringing about rapid lifecycle changes into digital cloud applications, especially those applications which are differentiating, is a fundamental business problem that we would want to solve. Most applications, or most enterprises of this digital era, will also need a rapid partner integration, or sometimes you will have a need for rapid partner self-serve and enablement needs from business networks, for example, or extended overall value proposition for your end customers of the enterprise. So that's one area that we see a lot of value that APIs bring. But also, not only that, on top of partner business IT services, you should be able to bring in a lot more value through API as well. Most enterprises also find a need for monetization of their IP, data, insight, and growing needs for governance and management of that monetization, and scalability of those systems will become a big need. And how will API strategy solve that? Of course, large enterprises and of the digital nature, we have a lot of siloed, disjointed IT that need to be bring about. So those API strategy will also solve some of those as well. Most of the enterprises, especially in IT asset management and optimization, will need API-based strategy to optimize their IT assets, especially in the legacy applications and legacy modernization as well. Integrating with cloud-based IT systems, of course, entire SaaS integration or SaaS components that you subscribe to, how would we rapidly adopt them? We cannot give our business a SaaS adoption roadmap of more than 2 months. So we have to be rapid. So agility and being able to transform and modernize your legacy IT systems, which sometimes we will never be able to get away from, are also problems what an API strategy can solve for customers. But how does business get impacted on an API first strategy is definitely identifying the prime forces of systems reengineering that will enable our enterprises to move towards that API strategy. Yes, API first strategy or API economy or API product-based SDLC are many names of the same nature that many enterprises start to think nowadays. But as I said, we need to find a center of gravity to put our API strategy surrounding it. For many Enterprises, it could be different. Some enterprises, the immediate tactical problem is to solve a SaaS integration need. So ideally for us, all IT stakeholders, especially in a digital transformation era, looking to apply API-based hybrid integration platform architecture. Fundamentally, this architecture should solve at a high level your strategic business requirements, for example, improving business agility, transforming the business model, embracing the API economy. Sometimes it could be just tactical business requirements. Example, integrating your new talent management system, maybe SaaS integration, or a HR application that you quickly adopted, or developing new APIs for supporting your mobile application or other clients. So some tactical business requirements also need to be fulfilled with this architecture needs. At the same time, the IT stakeholders demand that strategic principles need to be applied in this architecture. That means, yes, you need a bimodal IT, for example, or you need a base layering, or you need to go to postmodern ERP. Of course, everywhere you need to provide continuous delivery and continuous integration, especially for your fast-moving applications. But some enterprises also enter into a problem where they need to silo their IT into line of businesses. And how does that work as well? How can API and a hybrid integration strategy solve such needs? A lot of times, API should also solve, of course, your IT tactical goals. Being able to consolidate, being able to virtualize, containerize, being able to scale elastically, being able to monitor and monetize the IT assets at runtime, being able to leverage cloud computing and cloud environments and ecosystems. So those are IT tactical goals that this API strategy has to solve. Most important is having identified the capabilities required to support your current or emerging needs. We will be in a position to define a plan for implementing their target state through that API and hybrid integration strategy, and assembling the most appropriate combination of these components. Typically, there will be a combination of on-premise integration platforms. There will be a need for an iPaaS. There will be a need for integration software as a service and API management technologies. Now, fundamentally, before we go there, I would want all of you to understand also that API economy and API-based SDLC is a little different. We would like to take it as a API, as a product, as an IT product that get monetized internally, externally, what we call, not only the north-south traffic, but east-west traffic within the enterprise itself. And also create an ecosystem of an API economy that actual business models evolve out of it, that are derived out of business assets that are continuously fast-moving, exposed via APIs, consumed and as services by developers, effectively very short to time to market, and fast-changing innovative apps that deliver differentiating B2C, B2B, or B2E experiences, including operational dashboards. When it comes to the physical nature of how such an architecture will be, or how it needs to be formulated, we talk typically about establishing a reference architecture. Here in this enterprise integration digital era, API-based hybrid integration platforms are the norm. We would like to say that speed of innovation is a fundamental lever. Now, where would we apply that as a business goal, especially for those differentiating applications that we are going to build that will differentiate our business, are the fastest moving, and we need to move them to a speed of innovation. Also, the partner touch points, the customer touch points, the self-service enablement APIs also will be at a speed of innovation. those are the fastest moving IT systems. On the other end, we have existing IT, maybe even third-party COTS applications. Maybe we have operational systems that are still need to be leveraged. They need to be optimized. They need to be either lift and shift into cloud or legacy modernized, apply real world, new world, IoT and RPA technologies closer to the source of data, and expose that kind of analytics and insight for API-based consumption. But also SaaS applications and consistency and security around that SaaS data and assets of the enterprise that now are going into the cloud. Sometimes these SaaS applications are no longer just shared services. Even operational systems are becoming cloud enabled or deployed into cloud. Another big area of interest for API and hybrid integration strategy is enablement of data transformation of large enterprises. We will talk about that as well in ongoing discussion. But before we get to the detailed plan on some of the levers that we touch upon API strategy, I would like to quickly discuss upon some of the success stories that Kellton had with a few customers in applying portions of such strategy. Here in this use case, a US-based television company, a large company, have 16 cable channels, broadcast digital networks. They have a recent expansion into the dedicated web and mobile services for their content and multimedia. Of course, they're an organization that partner with a lot of their producers and a lot of the process about bringing content to the market and delivering it through their channels is a process that they wanted to optimize as well. So a lot of the exercise in this digital transformation aspect is to convert their integration into hybrid, convert their API-led connectivity into mature API ecosystem that will rapidly allow for connectivity of applications, not only their ERP, but also their SaaS applications, and bringing all those processes through rapid business process visibility and mitigate any kind of IT system scalability or system issues through also integrating instant management aspects rapidly. But eventually all these assets of their mid office, back office, and content management are now digitally enabled for allowing rapid build of digital systems, rapid build of digital experience and content management platforms for their channels. And this model allowed them to be future-proof. And essentially, the framework is allowing for newer and newer technology to be leveraged within that API strategy. Another good example from Kellton Tech, a success story, is a global payment processing giant. They're very big. They do everything for typically the banks and the transaction companies themselves, of whopping 31 million transactions per day. Now, such a payment gateway solution, when it needs to be deployed in such large ecosystem, their requirements are pretty stringent on how agile the platform is, how seamless the integration of various disparate systems underneath that process of deal optimization is leveraged through this architecture. And again, future-proofing it into a frictionless growth, being able to plug and play technology and best of breed patterns into the system. Here, they were dealing with the use case of deal submission, deal processing delays, how to mitigate and improve and optimize such of deal processing, eliminate some of the paperwork and like faxes and things like that, but also bringing that entire workflow and ecosystem together for a real-time processing and visibility and feedback such way that the delays and on merchant verifications are eliminated very quickly, giving back a system that can react to the operational criteria on the ground. With that, I would want to go into our second topic to talk about how we assess API maturity within our own organization, whether we are in the beginner stage or are we taking the right steps to mature one level at a time. What are those levers, right? Definitely, I would want to simplify it into three areas. How do we assess ourselves in API maturity? First is strategy. Are we using API strategically? I think most cases, a lot of the enterprises might not be in a position to actually define business drivers for an API strategy. Very likely we are in a tactical state. We are forced by this SaaS adoption that we have to now learn how to leverage APIs, or there is an application environment that is putting cloud application development and need microservices and API lifecycle management expertise. In some cases, legacy modernization and aspects of that are the drivers as well. But going back, taking a step back to understand the major levers of what the business transformation or the business problems we are signed up to solve, we go back to establish a strategy for the API roadmap itself. Essentially, the business goals need to be defined, and we will like to understand if the stakeholders, including the business, are involved in leveraging APIs as a in the aspects of monetization, in the aspects of finding separate business streams through APIs. So that is the strategy part. A lot of times, most enterprises do not have a thorough business driver strategy for APIs. Let's come to the implementation before we go to the adoption phase. Implementation aspect, there are primarily, of course, API lifecycle implementation itself, how APIs are composed in a specific domain for the application development, for example, or how APIs are composed in a specific data area in a data as a service architecture. Those are crucial on not only for your design time and change time, but also your runtime, how it will be implemented at runtime. Second aspect is monitoring that runtime or even the change time, development time aspects of API's lifecycle, and feeding it back for monetization is important. Now, monetization can be thought of as if we only expose an API outside, only then it is monetized. But sometimes you can look at monetization internally as well. And that monetization of APIs and treating API-based development as a product is important because the developer community engagement, which is also the third bullet there, but is the most important aspect of implementation in an API strategy. As you can understand, API-based integration is a different school of thought than what we call enterprise integration or ESB integration. Here, API-based integration or API-based connectivity is spread out across the entire enterprise. Every team will delve into APIs. So building a developer community where not only the APIs are registered and discoverable, but also engaging the developer and the consumer is very crucial for the successful adoption phase now. Now, adoption we would also want to look at various levers or various stages in the adoption stage to measure our own maturity of our API strategy. Of course, what is our current state of our APIs? It's just because there is a mobile application project required, we quickly started developing APIs to cater to that need, but we don't really think about lifecycle management, governance, or mashups at this point. Maybe not even think about at a strategic level. So tactical adoption versus defining a strategic path where we can, rapidly mash up APIs or even normalize the SDLC of APIs across the multiple IT domains and teams that will be leveraging these APIs. So most of the impediments will be about the complexity of your IT landscape. What is our application development teams doing? Are they more Azure friendly or AWS friendly, or is it a private cloud with Pivotal Cloud Foundry? Now, on the data side, are we more still on-prem data? Are we S3 Amazon data? Those are all the impediments of large-scale API adoption. So all of that complexity of the IT landscape also is important to understand whereas the API-based strategy being applied is the adoption maturity. Of course, in that adoption maturity, going beyond the technology and IT tactical goals and bringing about the strategic business requirements like an omni-channel experience for a customer against all the channels through API, or customer 360 for these omni-channels so that the customer insight and data is always true wherever and whichever form it is accessed. So those are our strategic business requirements that can be identified and measured whether we have matured in a certain area. So looking at would like to introduce the audience to this assessment from Kellton Tech, api.kelltontech.com. At the end of the session, you might be directed there as well. It's a quick 10-question assessment. You can take it on your behalf of yourself. You can take it on behalf of your organization or a sub-organization within your teams. You can compare within your peer and their own assessment as well, because every person would answer the question a little differently because they perceived they are in that level of maturity within the enterprise. So you can, it is free to use. It will eventually outcome is you'll get a report with a scorecard and some recommendations on various areas of this assessment. You can take it multiple times, trying various other questions, but also you can forward it to your colleagues to have a thorough understanding of where you stand yourself internally for an API-based strategic roadmap. Now, coming to that strategic roadmap, we are going to talk about in depth a little bit on some of those important levers of the API strategy. And I think fundamentally from the beginning, I've been telling the most important lever for API and hybrid integration strategy is agility, innovation agility or business agility. And they fundamentally start with being able to very rapidly create digital assets or change existing digital assets to meet immediate digital demands of our digital systems. So all of this aspect, being able to create a agile API as a product SDLC lifecycle that can bring these digital assets to market even faster. Sometimes agility for enterprises mean, as I said, bimodal IT. There will be needs where assuming our digital assets evolve to a level that citizen IT people, business analysts themselves can assemble various digital components for the digital demands that are needed by mobile or e-commerce platforms. But also a unified API portal, bringing about various IT domains or even business silos into one platform across the board, unifying. If you have multiple API portals, how do you unify them into one ecosystem? How do you unify even the runtime? If you have multiple API gateways, one on Azure, one on AWS, one on on-prem, if they're of multiple different technologies, how do you unify them? But also APIs as a self-service for business agility. Not only APIs are produced, but they need to be very effective in usage as well. That means anybody should be able to discover them, readily use them, and leverage them. Of course, customer engagement, whether that customer is a API consumer who is going to develop this new mobile app, or that customer is a partner who's going to leverage some APIs that are insightful to extend our own value proposition. All that is definitely need to feed back into the ecosystem so that we have dashboards that showcase the top API developer, or we have dashboards that showcase the top earning API and the monetization. These also will enable that economy or the culture that is also very important to enable such a business agility. Important lever, again, for a lot of API-based strategy and requirements, especially strategic business requirements are especially to partner self-serve. A lot of enterprises are already considering to expose their APIs of data or insight, or even applicational insight as well. Some of that insight, that when it get exposed, how do we expose it for in a self-serve nature? So we don't have to spend time in enabling our partner ecosystem if we have a better API that is well-defined, and we can rapidly onboard customers or partners onto our APIs, but also simplifying how we provide not only documentation, but the aspect of discovery of integrating with our APIs. So these are very fundamental in being able to create that partner self-service ecosystem, because in the digital transformation era, partner self-service and being able to monetize our data and IP is the biggest lever, and these are the areas that we will concentrate on. A lot of times, not only discovery, but being able to readily authenticate and authorize those partner ecosystem for these APIs and deploy them for runtime, but also measuring those runtime analytics of API consumption and linking them for invoicing or monetization as well is very important. Monetization of the developer community. So as I said, within the enterprise, there will be multiple aspects of API development. The microservices on the application side, the legacy modernization services on the on-premise applications, while data as a service APIs on the data side. All these APIs will eventually get mashed up together. They will consume each other to create a better insight for the digital applications. As these APIs consume each other, every time they are consumed, you can count as a monetization value. You probably, for example, you allocate an internal dollar for that developer every time his API gets consumed. Overall, you are creating a value and showcasing that value on how these APIs are being consumed. So in that aspect, creating that ecosystem of enhanced community engagement is very, very important. And creating that ecosystem of simplifying the adoption of APIs through easy documentation, and also simplifying the provisioning of the runtime policies. Sometimes the partner would like to consume the API, but immediately he would like to apply such in runtime policies as well against invoicing, against payments, or against access to other customers' records. So all that aspect of simplifying it through the portal and such lifecycle management and exposing the community features on the portal is the most important lever in API strategy and data adoption path. I know I talked about data as a service architecture surrounding most of the time your data lakes or data fabrics. It is important to enable access to relevant data. Of course, it is important to establish granularity of data access, or data. But also enhance user experience through aggregation transformation. That means we are talking about even analytics as a service. Now, typically in a lot of enterprises, either you have a data strategy that is establishing a data lake, or even if it is not at that level, migrating a lot of your data assets into the cloud or into a cloud nature. Sometimes even your big data that we are collecting needs to be leveraged in real time. So applying analytics closer to that such big data and exposing the insight that is derived from such analytics as consumable assets for these digital demands, and not just doing it once, but putting it into an ecosystem that is continuously changeable and more monetizable and innovative. So those are the kind of ecosystem that DaaS will enable, but also it will build that elastic scalability on access to the data. Of course, your data and its persistence in the cloud or real world infrastructures like Amazon S3 provide their own scalability at the persistence level. But at the access level, when our applications or systems or processes need data, that's where your access also need to be elastically scalable through these API layers. That way, enabling not only real-time data streams, but make DaaS as an API the default option. But at the same time, combining that data governance into the access and API governance as well, because data and access are the same levers for engineering. API security, again, is another big lever. Definitely API security is, of course, at the point of access and API gateways, but also API security can need to be applied from the design phase itself, the designing and development as well. Of course, in designing and developing, engineering these access points, whether it's API or SOAP or any TLS, we need to apply security patterns. Of course, OAuth, SAML, and JWT are most predominant in the engineering school thought. OAuth is more of tokenizing your access, so you don't have to use your passwords anymore. You can tokenize it with even with a certificate X509, and OAuth is typically applied with an authentication server on your transport level security. On the other hand, JWT more can be applied with your JSON or messaging, on sometimes on your HTML traffic as well. While on the other end, SAML is your SOAP-based tokenization, and also it's a standard for your SSO, single sign-on, as well. So some of these patterns are very crucial, how they applied in various scenarios, where they are applied, whether this API is an external API, we need an OAuth, whether this API is an internal microservices communication, we need a JWT applied, whether this is an API that we want to use SOAP or single sign-on, because those are SaaS-based access. So those are patterns that you have to recognize what is applied in which API and how they all come together to still meet the requirements of our enterprise IT security. Of course, most of this functionality, based on our COTS platforms that we might adopt from IBM, Software AG, MuleSoft, or any others, are all out-of-box functionality that need to be mapped together and applied into our patterns. Definitely, these runtime security policies like throttling an API or protecting against a DOS attack or IP blacklisting need to be applied and will come out of box in most of our technology choices. Definitely, these security also involve not just pass-through connectivity. You can also do a lot of data masking and request response transformation during those mashups. One more important lever is the legacy modernization. A lot of enterprises, especially large enterprises, we still will have a lot of legacy IT that we might not still get away from. And sometimes it is just that these legacy IT systems are not our differentiating systems. Maybe there are our mid-office, maybe we don't find a SaaS home for them, but they need to be optimized. They need to be leveraged still. They need to be modernized. They need to be participant of our digital ecosystems that on the other side we are evolving, and still cater to that digital demand from these legacy systems. A quick way, most of the enterprises have already gone through the SOA implementation and able to service enable some of their legacy systems. The next step, quick and easy, is to API enable some of those SOA services into RESTful APIs or JSON-based communication as needed. But also exposing that data and insight back into the API portals and bringing them together for rapid composition is the maturity steps for legacy modernization. So this allows you to reduce maintenance costs, especially for the experience layer outside of that legacy system when it is being adapted. We can accelerate implementation of legacy integration use cases with API-based strategy as well, and improve customer and user experience on top of these legacy systems. The last but not the least, of course, APIs will solve your microservices architecture. The future of cloud applications, whether it's public cloud, AWS, Azure, or private cloud, being able to create our differentiating applications, those applications that we will continue to spend our energy on to build on our own, will evolve into microservices strategy, a microservices architecture. And also, not only those microservices architecture are to cater to elastic scalability, but also what we call cloud neutrality. A lot of the demand, especially from IT strategic principles, is to not to get tied in with one cloud or the other. Make a lot of our differentiating, especially applications, to be cloud neutral in a containerized architecture. So not only converting or re-engineering our application into microservices, their deployment nature also is looked upon into Dockerization, Kubernetes, or even the COTS platforms like RHEL have their own containerization technologies that you can adopt as well. But fundamentally, in such applications that are containerized and such applications that are broken down into microservices that scale on their own, how does a middleware behave? How does an API provisioning, or how does an API security or API mashup work? So those are multiple schools of thought in middleware in a microservice. Sometimes it's called as a sidecar container design pattern, where you allow another container which houses your middleware sit next to your application container, and the container orchestration engine like Kubernetes will relate those two containers to belong to each other at runtime. But sometimes you would apply a grid strategy where the middleware will create a service grid where microservices now can be rapidly deployed in a CI/CD nature. So these are multiple architectural thoughts. We still have to see a fit for each individual organization based on their application environment ecosystem and their technology preferences. One over the other is the future state for middleware as well, where middleware in a microservice is very real for those fastest moving IT domains. So that is the architecture that will enable not only API micro gateways to be containerized and create that serverless APIs where you can now scale for on-demand scalability that is, you don't have to sign up for servers up ahead for your scalability needs. It can be elastically scalable against prescribed infrastructure services. Again, event-driven serverless applications, maybe even event-driven hardware configuration onto this containerization is also the future as a function as a service architecture as well. With that, I touched upon quite a few levers that will help in an API strategy that will allow for enterprises to push a lot of the digital transformation goals through the IT transformation. At this point, I would like to quickly touch upon what Kellton brings to the table for most enterprises in this journey. We typically help. Can very effectively help define your business and technical value for your API strategy. A lot of times, it is not only the IT stakeholders, the business stakeholders need to understand the value proposition and the future state. So some of that education or even workshops and whiteboarding sessions are fundamental to a big buy-in from the enterprise stakeholders. So we help the IT stakeholders responsible for integration or API strategy or the digital strategy to conduct such orientation exercises or even education exercises. We do definitely excel in defining the enterprise API strategy through our reference architecture services as well. As part of that, establish a monetization strategy on your digital assets as part of your digital transformation goals. We can definitely elaborate through that steps to come out with the roadmap for your API management strategy, especially the implementation phase. What are the levers that are important to you will be the ones that we will be addressing. Most important, we are an organization, I think we're, during introduction I said, neutral to technology. So we do have partnerships with many technology vendors. We work on their technology in our labs aggressively, continuously, and with the latest versions. So what that means is, especially any kind of decisioning or any kind of architectural gate checks that our customers would like to undertake, pilots, POCs, we are there for you. We would have done those pilots or the POCs and have already gone through the architectural gate checks, or we would execute those POCs and pilots on your behalf in our labs and provide that insight to go and cross over your architectural gate checks. Why we do that? We understand in this new digital era, R&D and fail fast is very important. So maybe through our labs, through our aggressive research, we want to provide that failure as a service so that you fail faster and go to your next step and keep climbing up your maturity ladder. With that, I would like to open up for Q&A, and Kaisha, look out for question and answers. We will address them as they come up.
Hi, Ram. Thank you so much for sharing that valuable information on developing your API first strategy. And because of the lack of time, I'm going to ask, we have had a few questions come in and we will be replying to those via email. I wanted to let all of our participants know that immediately following the webinar, you will be redirected to our API maturity assessment. So that way, if you will take a few minutes to complete that, we can then send you a full report with actionable insights on how to progress to the next level of your API journey. And also reminding you that we will be sending out a recording of the webinar in the next few days, so be on the lookout for that. You guys have been a fantastic audience, and we want to thank you again for joining us today.
There's a question, Kaisha. I'd like to address it.
Okay, sure, that's fine.
Go ahead.
Okay, without the use of middleware like MuleSoft, etc., how would you secure the environment, for example, using WAF and other appliances?
I'm maybe not familiar with WAF, but any other appliance like say cast iron or RBG, typically they should come with all their aspects of applying OAuth or OData, or being able to apply JWT or SAML, depending on how that access is being provided, the endpoint is being provided. If it's a HTML, JSON, you can apply JWT tokens. Usually, these appliances should have inbuilt capabilities to apply the OAuth pattern or the SAML pattern and so on. For example, MuleSoft. MuleSoft, Anypoint platform, yes, you have the cloud version and the on-premise version. But as soon as you are exposing an endpoint like a web service or like an API on a particular gateway, that's where the gateway will be the point of application of your security. Usually it depends on, again, which gateway you're adopting. If it's an on-premise gateway or if it's a cloud gateway, cloud service will provide that ability to create that security pattern for your endpoint. Does that answer your question?
They also clarified it's a web access. WAF stands for Web Access Firewall. I don't know if that.
Okay. Okay. I think Web Access Firewall typically is for web applications firewall. Maybe they don't really deal with directly in APIs, but very likely, yes, they should have security inbuilt with them as well.
Great. I think that's all the questions that we have for now. Again, thank you everyone for joining us, and we look forward to the next time.
And thank you for the question. In case if the answers are not clear, we will go back through your questions. We will research on them. Definitely get back to you with intelligent answers.
Thank you.